You know, I often base my sermons on information that I receive on the internet. And unfortunately, some of them are just wonderful, but they usually don't include who actually wrote it. I know who sent it to me, but not who wrote it. But I received something that I thought was very interesting, and I thought it was worthwhile, and Spirit agreed that this is something we could perhaps all share. This is called The Stranger. A few years after I was born, my dad met a stranger who was new to our small Texas town. Excuse me. From the beginning, Dad was fascinated with this enchanting newcomer and soon invited him to come and live with our family. The stranger quickly accepted, and he was around from then on. As I grew up, I never questioned his place in our family. In my young mind, he had a special place. My parents were instructors, of course. Mom taught me to obey. But the stranger, oh, he was our storyteller. He would keep us spellbound for hours on end with adventures and mysteries, and sometimes funny stories as well. If I wanted to know anything about politics or history or science, he always knew the answers about the past. He helped explain things that were going on in the present, and very often he was able to predict things about the future. He took us to wonderful places. Thanks to him, I saw my first Major League Baseball game. His stories made me laugh, and sometimes they made me cry. The stranger talked a lot, but Dad didn't seem to mind. Sometimes, when we were shushing one another not to miss the stories, Mom would get up and go out to the kitchen for a little peace and quiet. Now, Dad had very strong moral convictions, and he raised us with those convictions. But the stranger didn't always follow or feel obligated to follow those same convictions. For example, the family certainly never used profanity. Mom and Dad could get pretty upset, but they didn't swear. And we knew we better not swear. And the people that came to our home and other family members didn't use that kind of language either. But sometimes the stranger did. And when he did, Mom would blush and Dad would look uncomfortable, but Dad never said anything. Dad and Mom weren't totally against alcohol, but they certainly didn't use it, hardly ever. And yet the stranger seemed to feel it was pretty liberally used and that it could make everybody's life a little better and certainly a lot more fun. So he talked about alcohol a lot, and he even made cigarettes seem cool. Cigars were manly, and pipes were very distinguished. Sometimes the stranger even talked about things that Mom and Dad never did. He talked about sex. And that really made people squirm because he was so open about it. Well, I know now that growing up as a child, I was influenced by my mom, by my dad, and by this stranger that Dad had invited into our home. Although he often told stories that were really against our family values, nobody ever corrected him, and nobody ever asked him to leave. You know, more than 50 years now have passed since that stranger moved in with our family. He's blended right in, and his stories don't seem quite as inviting or exciting as they did once upon a time, and yet he still has a place in the family, and if you go back and visit the folks' house, he's still there in the den waiting for somebody to listen to his stories. What was the stranger's name? We just called him TV. Oh, and he's married now. She's Mrs. Computer. Now, I thought that was funny, and I'm glad some of you did too. But you know, it is also thought-provoking, because we do invite stories into our home by way of the television, by way of the computer. And, you know, we turn the television on because we want to watch a particular show. Maybe we'll sit still long enough to watch that show, but usually we're up and down and in and out and doing other things. And somehow one show runs into the next, and then the next, and then the next. And we wonder why we don't sleep so sound at night sometimes. Well, you know, you can't have all this background noise coming at you, stories coming at you. So many of them are filled with language that we don't ordinarily use, or violence, a lot of violence, a lot of strong feelings, a lot of negativity. And yet that's running nonstop. Whether we're in the room or just in the next room, it's constantly there, filling not only us, our hearts and our minds, with this senseless negative information, but think of the vibration that it's building in our very home. Our home, our nest, our sanctuary.